My name is Douglas Peterson, or just Doug Peterson. I first came to Kenya in 1974 on a trip, overland trip from London, and spent some time here and in Tanzania as well. And during that time, I started hearing a lot of Kenyan music and Tanzanian music, and it kind of stuck with me. I came back in 1975 for another few months, and then I was a university student. I came back to Kenya in 76 through 80 to do field work, and I was living out in western Kenya in Bunyore, in what's now Vihiga County. And I lived in a home there with a family on a farm, and every day I would hear music all day long on the national service from Voice of Kenya. And I got to know all the music of Kenya at that time. Later I started buying lots of the local rumba from groups like Leswanika, Simba Wanyika, and became quite a fan of that music. So I went back home to the United States, and I finished my studies. I got a PhD in anthropology and finished up in 1984. And then I came back in 85, and I was teaching here in Kenya at a school that was mainly for American students who were coming for a study abroad for a semester or perhaps a full year. And from 85 until 89, end of 89, I was getting very involved in music here. And I worked with Livingston Amaumo of the Ahadi record label, and together we put out a series of LPs, including the famous Kerubandika and the Mlimani Park collections that included Neema. So did a lot of work with the Tanzanian music with Livingston and his label. And at that time I was just collecting everything I could find. So I have today a very, very nice collection of music from that period, from the 70s, from the 80s, of both albums and lots of singles. After 1989, I returned to the United States, and I taught for a while. And at the same time, I started doing an African music radio show where I got to play all these records on the radio and the new CDs that were coming out at the time. And so I learned, I was a volunteer radio person in the public network in the United States. So I learned a lot about radio. And a few years later, when my anthropology jobs had finished, I actually took a job in radio in the mid-90s that lasted for 20 years. So I became a radio producer and technical person, automation, and so I learned all about radio from this volunteer work, and it became my second career. And in that time, I continued to do radio shows, and I did radio as a profession too. In 2015, I retired, and so now I have lots of free time to spend working on my collection, digitizing my collection, and one of my specialties is cleaning up old vinyl that's scratchy and sounds bad. I can make it nice, and I've helped a number of international releases of Kenyan music, Tanzanian music. So that's what I do these days. just enjoy music. I come to Kenya, listen to live music, lots of live music. I look for old vinyl and try to fill in parts of my collection that are missing, and just enjoy music of a different era, because I'm certainly a product of the 70s and the 80s here. As the internet came up and websites started being developed, I started one that I called EastAfricanMusic.com, and that's still going today. And it's not a very sophisticated website, but I wanted to put something out there that would allow people to learn about Kenyan and Tanzanian music. And I was hoping Ugandan, but I don't have very little on Ugandan music. But I do have some essays on Kenyan and Tanzanian music, that some that I did, some that some other people wrote. And it's now, when I first started it, it was kind of new information. Now you could say it's historical information, because it's talking more about that earlier period. The things I wrote myself, first of all, I did write some articles for the Rough Guide to World Music. I wrote a section on Kenyan music in that edited volume on world music. And some of those things appear on the East African Music website as well. And occasionally I write notes for albums that come out. Here's one, for example, of the Kenya Special. I wrote the background notes on the history of Kenyan music and Tanzanian music that's that accompanies this collection, along with other notes from Emmanuel Mwendwa. So I write notes. I've done compilations as well of Tanzanian and music for Stearns, the Stearns label. We did a Vijana jazz and a Western jazz compilation, and then we did for Kenya a Dio Misiani collection, and we've done a Moreno collection, Moreno Batamba. So, and in each case I wrote up the notes and wrote something about the artist. So much of that is on my website, and you can read about it there. Much of the information I had is kind of personally gained because I knew these people. I knew Moreno very well in the 80s. We were friends. And I knew Kakai Kalonzo of Le Kilima Bogo Brothers. We were friends too, and up to his death. And same thing for the Wanyika bands. I knew many of the musicians personally, and I used to see them perform all the time. On a weekly basis, I would go out and hear Les Wanyika, or Le Mangalepa, or Simba Wanyika, or one of the Benga bands, like Le Kilima Mbogo Brothers, or Kamaru's band. So I knew all of these people and did formal interviews with them, but some of my information is just what I learned in talking with them and asking them about what they do and what they like and how they do it and how it all works. So that is kind of the basis of the website and where the information comes from, and kind of why I'm so interested, because I was a part of a lot of this. I knew these people and I really enjoyed it. I can appreciate, at the time during the 70s and 80s, as I listened to the radio, you would just hear these songs that would just jump out at you as, well, this is fantastic. And of course for me, since I didn't speak Luo, it had to be music. The music that grabbed me, not the lyrics so much. The lyrics, in fact, sometimes, occasionally, you would find Benga music in Swahili, And so for Kakai Galanzo, I could understand a bit and enjoy that, the lyrics as well. But most often, you know, it was in some local language, whether it was Luya or Luo or Kikamba or Kikuyu. I didn't know what they were saying. And so it had to be musically just very interesting to me. And that would include especially the guitar part at the end, which was always, you know, kind of the best part of the formula. I perceive in Benga that they had, you know, a very nice formula for a 4-minute and 40-second single, sometimes on 2 sides, but often for the Benga it was just one single that was a one-sider, and you would do 2 minutes, or about 2 minutes of some kind of verses, a story being told, and it would be a you know, one tune, and then 2 minutes in, you get this change to a new variation on that. Maybe a chorus comes in, maybe back and forth, and so you get a little more. And so about 3.5 minutes in, then suddenly they're done with the verses and they just start playing guitars. And that's the part that for, you know, people who aren't Kenyan, for the Europeans and Americans, that's the part that would really take hold, and my friends and I would really enjoy listening to that great guitar interweave and 2 guitars and bass. It was really pumping and moving, and I appreciated that very much. So that's what I liked about the Benga. And on the rumba side, it was more laid back. It was not so intense as those guitar solos in the Benga, but it had such a mellow feel of very long extended songs where, you know, 8-minute long, where you get an A and a B side or an album side that was 8 minutes, and you take the time to really develop a song. The rumbas ones often use more instruments, horn parts, you know, saxophones and horn, trumpets or something, and a repeating line that throughout that well, equally compelling, you know, somewhat different, but for me, I could love it like Benga too. For me today, first of all, I don't get to hear quite as much Benga because it's harder to find, it's harder to buy. You know, you used to be able to go into a record shop and just listen to songs and buy one, or you know one already from the radio, but now, in this new digital age, it's a little bit harder to sample as a visitor to coming through to sample Benga. It's harder to find it, and it's also changed in character in that now that there are no restrictions on the length of time you have. You know, before you had 5 minutes on the single at most. Now you have as much time as you want, and people take 8 minutes regularly on the Benga song. They can take 15 if they want. But I don't find that very interesting because that part of Benga today Benga is more in the words, I think. It's for the listener. And so the music, to me, is much more repetitive than it seemed from the singles, the Benga singles of the 70s and 80s. So I don't find it quite as interesting because they're so long and they kind of sound the same for the entire time. The guitar solos that I used to enjoy so much, they don't seem to be there anymore. The instrumental portion is missing in a lot of cases. So I have heard some good benga. Even today, there are people doing things that are very nice, and people are capable of doing that stuff. But in the recordings that I've heard, it's kind of not as interesting for me as a non-speaker of the local language that they're in. Selections of vinyl that DJs have discovered in Europe. So there are a number of DJs who are mining African vinyl from Nigeria or West Africa, other places in West Africa, and here in Kenya, or from Tanzania, or from other locations as well, where they find things that was the crossover music of that period. So you have bands that were doing something a little bit different. They weren't doing benga here. They were doing some kind of international sound, maybe something like what Slim Ali was doing with kind of a funk sound with horns and sounding a lot like an American music in the 1970s. Or you have people doing Afrobeat music that is also kind of based on that James Brown funk stuff of that era, of that early era. And so these European DJs found in African music kind of fusions of 1970s pop music, international pop, with local styles here in Kenya or other places. So a lot of that has emerged in Europe, and they have in fact done some compilations of albums from that genre. But it's sort of the outside of the outlier of Kenyan music for many of those people in these compilations. Many of the songs in here in a compilation like this one were not in the mainstream of Kenyan music at the time. So it's a little bit different. So we're talking maybe two different things. One is the DJ phenomenon, where and the albums that come from people who are interested in dance music and DJing. And then there's the collectors, the people who are buying up all that benga and the rumba music of the time from eBay in the original forms. And so I can't tell you what, I don't know why it happened, but there are people out there who are, you can call them collectors in quotation marks, and they collect, and that's what they do, and they want to get everything they can. Some of these people have a lot of money. They're able to pay a lot of money because it's a bidding process online. They're able to pay the top price. Some of these albums that I own, they go for $250 now or more. And I'm not a collector in that sense. I can't pay that money. But the people I'm competing against don't have the same understanding of the music the way I do. So I don't exactly know who I'm bidding against, because you never know these winners and lose, or the other losers. But I have a suspicion that who's ever buying these things, they're not. It's more like adding something to the shelf and having a rare copy. It's like book collecting, but it's not so much for the music. I don't know that there's any international record labels that find this music interesting enough that they want to take a chance on it. it's the international market for physical product has diminished greatly. You might be able to do a specialty one in vinyl, but it's hard to sell CDs these days in Europe, and it's hard to market this material as compilations of unknown groups. So that's one problem. So they all kind of coalesce. The problems come together: the lack of understanding of the meaning of the songs, the similarity of the songs, the repetitiveness. I think Benga suffers from that, and there's no real Benga powerhouse labels here anymore. You used to have a label you could go to, and you say, so they would have a number of people who they could help an outsider, a European, to market themselves. Now each band, each artist is an individual, and so they're on their own almost. There are a few labels left here that are doing things, but I think the days of a label being able to assist people to market their materials abroad is very much gone. Nowadays, everything is put it out on digitally and just let it see what the market does. And so there are lots of digital releases from Africa, but very few of them can generate enough interest that would want to make a European promoter bring that band to Europe. I mean, there are things here already in Kenya that are very interesting and deserve an international market. Right now in Kenya, there are all kinds of artists who do wonderful things, and some of them have, some of the younger artists doing very popular music, not Benga, but other things. They know how to market themselves, and they can do very well. Some have contacts in Europe, and some have gone off to the various exhibitions to showcase their talents. It's still very hard for even those people, but it's out there. But I think for the traditional line of Benga, where we are today in Benga, very little of that is getting any exposure outside of Kenya. You can put it online, but I think most of the Benga artists don't even know how to do that.
Good. Maybe about, I understand you had a show that's called Music of Africa.
Oh yeah, I still have the show.
And how is the feedbacks when you, and what is the process you use to get the music of Africa on your playlist? And how is the feedbacks? And how did you get the show in?
I've been doing a radio show of African music in Seattle, different radio shows for more than 20 years. And I started in 1991, and one of my colleagues who does the other alternate weeks with me on the show, he started his show in 1984, his first show. So African music has been on the radio in the Seattle area of the US, Seattle, Washington, for quite a number of years, since 1984. And now we have just the one show in Seattle. It's every Thursday night at local time, 7 o'clock till 9. And 2 hours of African music, which comes largely if it's historical, much of it would come from my collection, especially if it's Kenyan or Tanzanian. I always try to find a few things from the 70s or 80s, and I enjoy playing things from more recent too when I have them. But it's mainly things I collect when I come here periodically. I go around and I go to record shops, I go to lots of live performances, and if an artist is selling a CD, I buy it. So last week I saw Fadili at a Go Down concert. I bought his album, I'll put it on the radio. Sometimes an artist will send me one, so I'm blanking on the guy. There's a guy named Suleimani Skasi. Suleimani Skasi. He's playing at Connections, and I don't remember his band name. I don't remember the band name. Sometimes an artist will seek me out and they'll send me a copy of a new recording by digital transfer over the internet, and if I like it, I put it on the radio. That's one thing, is I just don't put anything on the radio. I have to like it, but there's plenty to like here. So if something comes by, whether it's digital transfer, or whether I pick it up as a current CD today from somebody like Winyo or Fadili or Eric Wainaina or Sauti Sol, I put it on the radio.
Did you ever had time to maybe mingle with Chandarana? Do you know a guy by the name Chandarana? And what can you say about the vinyls he sells? And I understand you clean vinyls, passion of vinyls.
Chandarana's I know the recorded music of Chandarana very well from his Karicho record labels. And so for many years, he was recording doing a very wonderful job getting Tanzanian bands to come up to Kericho and record there, or doing local benga groups, or a whole range of different artists from Kenya and Tanzania from his Kericho studios. And they were all very nicely done. I mean, he had really good sense of artistic technique in his recording. He knew what he was doing. And so these recordings now are somewhat rare now, because very few of them have emerged in reissues of any sort. Part of that's because his own family, he and his brother seem to be perhaps suspicious well, they value the collection very much, and they don't want it to be exploited badly. So they have been rather restrictive in how they've used it. I went and talked to him, it was nearly 20 years ago, probably, to talk about doing reissues, licensing some materials, and they just refused. They told me at that time, we want to sell the whole collection to somebody, and they wanted a very large number. Well, that's unrealistic, but it's unrealistic that anybody other than maybe another Kenyan label or would want to try that. But so very little of this material has emerged. It would be really a wonderful thing if arrangements could be made to start re-releasing some of his materials, the Chandarana materials from the Saba Saba label and all the other sub-labels of his company. I don't know the condition of the tapes, but if he retained his tapes, it may be a really wonderful source for music in the future. And it's certainly a source of, it's certainly something that deserves to be in Kenya's musical heritage as an archived project at some point, I would hope. I have a colleague, a friend who's from Germany, Werner Grebner, who has been studying this music for the last 30 or 40 years as well. And he has been actively producing and releasing this music in Europe on his own record label and other record labels. And he in fact told me himself he's very interested in some of Chandarana's coastal music. So I think there is potential for this to do quite well internationally. So I would hope that he would be open to that at some point. This one is the early records, the 78 RPM speed record that was manufactured in Kenya from the early 50s up until about 1963. And very brittle. You can break these very easily, but a real powerhouse of music. And it was this same kind of vinyl that brought the Cuban sounds to East Africa and West Africa and Zaire, that kind of was the basis of several different musics of the rumba variety that were marketed, Cuban music marketed here in Africa. So these 78s are really something special. You do have to have a special player that has a stylus that can do 78s, and you want to treat these ones very carefully. These have a pretty high market value. One like this, almost any of them are $50, no matter what they are. So, and something that's famous would be even much more, I suspect. But then, from the early 60s, or from I think about 63, the 45 RPM vinyls came out. So those were, the earlier ones were a shellac, or a plastic that, shellac plastic. The early ones were shellac, very, very breakable. These on vinyl, very good lifespan. You can really, they can take a beating. But unfortunately, many of them on the secondary market have taken a beating. I mean, they're very scratched, and they've seen better days. But nevertheless, collectors, whether it's in Kenya or abroad, are very interested in scooping up all of these things. You cannot, if these are sitting anywhere unused, someone will want them. And there's a market for them now. So So anyway, if you have these in your collection, in your possession, and aren't using them or want them, you can make some money from them. If you own them and love them, then keep your valuable treasure. And among the samples you've shown me here today, some very nice sounds here. I see the local Congolese sound in Jimmy Moni Mambo in one of his various bands from Babu Shah's Hit Parade label. Here's the international label Polydor, which released a whole bunch of rumba sounds, as well as a little bit of benga, as well as plenty of Congolese sounds on their ASL label. And the other sample here, Luo music from Andrew Crawford Productions, but produced by the very famous P.O. Canindo. One of the things about these vinyls that are going out now to collectors and people on the secondary market, the used vinyl market, is that a lot of it doesn't sound very good. A lot of it's kind of worn out. It's been played a lot. It had a nice past. When I buy these things, I immediately try to fix them up because I don't want to play them on my radio show sounding all scratchy and with clicks and pops so because of my training in audio production, I am able to use digital tools to remove a lot of that extra noise. So I'll record the vinyl the way it is in high quality, and then I'll go through and painstakingly take out every single little pop and click and try to make it clean the way it originally was, the way you heard it on the tape as they were taking it to the record factory. And you can do a lot with that. You can really make vinyl sparkle again and make it sound good in digital form. There are a lot of people who say that digital doesn't sound as good as vinyl, and it may sound different to some people. So a brand new, clean vinyl can sound pretty good, and you may appreciate the sound of that. For me, in the digital realm, I think the digital and the vinyl are equivalents. I don't see that one is particularly better than the other. In fact, I think the digital is better in the sense that you can't degrade it, you can't spoil it easily. Digital has a problem in the future in that it keeps changing. We don't know if the formats we have today will be the same formats we use in the future. So there's a little bit of a problem there, is that you may have to take all the digital product in of now and convert it again and again and again in the future to preserve it. But whereas the vinyl will always play if it's a good piece of vinyl, and that's reassuring. For me, I would like to see Kenyan music, an archive of Kenyan music created that would kind of suck up all the recordings we can find, because the actual studios rarely have the master recordings anymore. You can't, for most songs, for most musical performance, it is the record that is the the reference point now because there's no tape before it. So keeping a clean copy, getting a clean copy of the record, and then preserving it in digital form would be very important for Kenya's heritage, Kenya's musical heritage. Benga is a national style. This rumba was a unique style of the region. And so the Tanzanian and Congolese rumba from Nairobi is very special. It's not just anything. It's something that was unique to Nairobi in that time. And so whether it's Benga or whether it's rumba, whether it's a local Kenyan artist or whether it's a Tanzanian or Congolese artist, that was a unique period, and it's worthy of preservation in its highest form, in its best format. So I would hope that things can be done here in Kenya in the future to collect all of that vinyl and put it into an archive, a digital archive that can be used in the future, a reference point, an archive that people can study, that could be made available to radio stations for clean, good copies of Kenyan music to be heard by everybody. Because right now, a lot of the music that you hear, even online, internationally online, the things you can buy, they're poorly made copies of the original. And I find that to be very sad because it doesn't do justice to the quality of the music. Music sounded great, and then you hear some low fidelity, scratchy version online, and you say, why would anybody want that? No, you don't want that. You want the original sound. When the MCSK was releasing a whole lot of music online a few years back, they put out many, many albums from Kenyan artists. And I bought a lot of those digitally online, and I was often very disappointed in the quality of the sound because they weren't good transfers. They weren't the original sounds were just not as brilliant. They weren't, or the speeds were a mess, or it was dull sounding, different problems. But if that's what people are hearing on the airwaves, if that's what people are hearing in their earbuds when they download music, then I can see why they may have a problem marketing it, why people wouldn't like Benga. Because if you're a young person and you didn't know what it really sounded like, you might think, this doesn't sound very good. And it doesn't. So getting the standard again up to the original standard, the quality that it was at the very beginning. And in fact, you can even go beyond that. Some of the vinyl that I have restored in my work, I'm able to clean up some distortion that was in the original vinyl. So you can actually make it sound better than the original sometimes. In my own experience, I've learned over a great many years how to do this. So I started doing this back in 1995, and I have, it's been a slow process, but I've learned incrementally how to fix little problems. And so now I have a pretty good concept or idea how to approach the different problems you hear when trying to convert vinyl to digital. So now I have a set of steps that I generally go through. And I was thinking about this just recently, that I'm intending to, when I get back home to the US, run through those steps and kind of do a YouTube tutorial that people can watch and see what I do to make these things sound better. So I'm going to create a kind of a tutorial that people anywhere at any time then can find, and one-on-one training would be nice, but one on thousands is even better, I think, if people are interested.